Hey ladies and gentlemen, Stephen here from Redolessence. Welcome back to another video. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a closer look at a fragrance by the company Haramain. And this one came out in 2019, and this one is called Opulent Sapphire. So make sure to stay tuned. So once again, this fragrance came out not too long ago. 2019 is the year of release for it. This one is called Opulent Sapphire. There is another one called Opulent Saffron, so don't get confused between the two. And of course, this is the one that comes in this bluish color. And I think a lot of times when we look at the box or the bottle of the fragrance and there's a certain color designated to it, we kind of get an idea of what it's going to smell like. And in many ways, that is the case with this fragrance. When I was looking at the note breakdown online, it does have aquatic notes listed for this fragrance, and so I was expecting it to sort of go in blue territory, but I was also quite happy that it wasn't the typical blue, like sort of Nautica fragrance that I think a lot of us are so used to smelling with so many of these brands. They kind of go in this almost, dare I say, generic blue phase that this one doesn't really go into, which I was really happy about. Now, if you look at the note breakdown, there is myrtle, there's basil, there's juniper, there's rose, there's bergamot, there's lemon. There are a ton of notes in this fragrance. Of course, you don't necessarily pick out all of them, or I should say I can't speak on behalf of you, but I don't pick up on all of those notes. But there are some notes that I do pick up on, and I think they give a really interesting character and facet to the fragrance. I'm excited to tell you what I get from the smell. Let's start with the presentation. So I do want to apologize to those of you who saw my presentation for Opulent Saffron, just because this presentation is exactly the same except for a different color. So you do have this really nice texture here on the sides of the box, on the perimeter of the box. You also have the name towards the bottom, and this is a 100 ml eau de parfum. The box for this one I think is pretty cool. You have the same sort of texture here on the sides. Kind of looks like a Bluetooth speaker if I'm being honest, but I do think it's a nice presentation. Quite different from other presentations that I have in my collection. And then towards the top here it just says Haramain. The box opens up to reveal a podium in which the bottle rests. And as you can tell, the bottle looks exactly like the box, except it's a lot smaller. The cap for this fragrance does click into place, but I wouldn't pick it up from the cap because it doesn't click into place too securely, and this is a heavy bottle. And the distribution on the atomizer is nice and wide. Let's continue with the smell. Now, as soon as this fragrance opens up, you are going to get this blue vibe from it. But like I said to you earlier, it's not this sort of typical blue vibe that you are going to get from like a lot of Nautica fragrances or anything like that. It doesn't come across as generic or uninspiring. There's actually something in here that makes it a bit creamy, and I really appreciate that about this fragrance. And initially, I wasn't entirely sure how to feel about it because none of those ingredients really popped or came across in an overly organic way, which sometimes I'm really interested in. When you think of fragrances that contain lemon, and I do get a lot of lemon from this fragrance. I think of fragrances like Aqua Viva by Parfumum Roma, or even Eau d'Adrienne by Nicutal. And I don't necessarily get that very bright, vibrant, rindy, juicy, acidic and tart lemon note from this fragrance. Instead, I get a more sort of muted and toned down lemon note in combination with bergamot, however, with the lemon still being a little bit stronger, but it gives this overall fresh and creamy vibe to the fragrance that I really enjoy. It's almost like you're looking at one of those fragrances, but with blurry vision, where all of the notes are sort of blurred out and you're not necessarily picking up on one particular note. But when you look at the note breakdown and you smell it, you're like, oh, okay, I can see how that's in there. Or yeah, I can sort of make out the role that this ingredient or this note plays in the particular fragrance. So it does have that lemon in the opening, and I do certainly pick up on the lemon. In terms of the basil that's used in here, because I know a lot of times when basil is used in particular fragrances, and there is one that I have been really enjoying this spring, and it's by Hermetica. It's called Green Lion. This one smells quite different from that, but whenever I do smell basil in fragrances, it almost kind of gives fragrances this minty vibe that I'm not necessarily getting from this fragrance. So I don't know how much of a role the basil is playing in this fragrance. And in terms of the myrtle, I sort of categorize myrtle, clary sage, and all of these other aromatic ingredients together. I sort of throw them in the same boat. And I do believe that this fragrance has a bit of an aromatic presence, but the ingredient that I'm getting The second most strongly in this fragrance, right behind the lemon, is the rose. And once again, same criticism that I gave in regards to the lemon note. It doesn't necessarily smell overly organic or anything like that, but I'm fine with it. And I think one of the things that I think really leans in the favor of this fragrance is that with rose being a super strong and natural and organic smelling ingredient, I think a lot of Westerners will be put off by it. You know, I do see that there are a lot of designer fragrances, like there's a Cartier fragrance called Declaration d'un Soir. There's also the newest Moschino Toy Boy. Those fragrances have a really strong rose note in them. And I've also heard from a lot of my subscribers that have actually gone out there and tried these rose-based fragrances, and they have reverted to me and said, you know what, yeah, it smells feminine, or it wasn't really my style, or it's not the type of fragrance that I would wear. And it's really the rose that's turning people off. I think the rose that's used in this fragrance is quite different, in the sense that you're not necessarily going to pick up on it, but when it's mentioned to you, you're going to be like, oh yeah. But it's contrasted by all these other ingredients, and I do really think that it plays rather well with all of these other ingredients that are in there. So in terms of that blue appeal, I think it is sort of enveloped by all of these other notes, in the sense that it doesn't smell like Cologne, it doesn't smell like all of these typical blue aquatic aroma chemicals that so many blue scents are rife with. I think that it's in there and is sort of lurking in the background, but you do have these other notes that are being spotlighted that sort of give the fragrance its own unique personality, and I really do appreciate that. But I would say it's an aromatic, creamy, lemony, slightly floral, although aquatic fragrance that is super appropriate, not just for the summer, but also for the springtime as well. I know I also reviewed Opulent Sapphire. That is a fragrance, in full disclosure, I'm not going to be wearing. I'm going to wait until it gets a little bit colder outside, which of course we're just entering spring now, so it could be something that potentially takes many, many months to get around to. But this one I definitely will be wearing, because I do find this to be quite good for the springtime, and I think it's going to serve me well. It's also one that my wife enjoys. I've actually been wearing this one around the house. I do it on skin and on clothing, and on clothing it will last about 8 hours. And so skin, you're not necessarily going to get the same performance. Of course, your skin is more or less going to eat it up, but I did spray it on this shirt, as a matter of fact, and it is lasting me 8-9 hours later, which is pretty solid in terms of a blue aquatic citrus dominant fragrance. So you can tell there are some base notes in there that are really amping up the longevity, sort of serving as fixatives for this fragrance. So really interesting that you're going to get a blue fragrance that, again, doesn't smell overly organic, but it's going to give you really good longevity, which I think is impressive. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now, first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I find it to be a pretty unique fragrance. I know when looking at Haramain's track record, a lot of their fragrances are more so inspired by more popular niche fragrances, sometimes designers too, I suppose, in the case of like the Invictus Aquas or whatever. With this particular fragrance, maybe it's my ignorance or my lack of knowledge, but I can't compare it to anything else that I've tried. So I do find it to be fairly unique. The overall smell is very pleasant, just keeping in mind, of course, that nothing about this fragrance is really going to be super organic or natural smelling, but it has a way of sort of taking all of these ingredients, fusing them together to create this overall really likable, creamy, fresh fragrance that isn't trying to do things the way all of these other mass-marketed designer fragrances that have been hitting the market as of late are trying to do it, like the Invictus Aquas of the world and the Urban Heroes by Jimmy Choo, or the Davidoff Run Wild, and all of these other fragrances that kind of smell the same. So this one really does stand out, and I appreciate it for that very much. Longevity on this one, on skin, you're going to get about 6 hours. If you spray it on clothing, you're going to get 8 or 9 hours. Projection is the best, of course, when you first apply it. It does have those bright, citrusy, volatile ingredients, and I would venture to say the projection was good for the first 2 hours. It became a skin scent around that 4.5 to 5 hour mark. I think given the price of this one, you can afford to spray it several times throughout the day, and you can also afford to spray it a bit more liberally than you would some of your more expensive fragrances in your collection or that you're interested in picking up. So this one I think is quite solid. In terms of the versatility, incredibly versatile. I think this one could very well be a unisex fragrance. I think there's something about it that a lot of people might want to say is for men, just because whenever you think of these overly blue, oceanic, aquatic fragrances, they're very rarely women's fragrances, and if they are, they usually add this sort of fruity note in there, like peach or apricot or something like that, and you don't have that going on in this fragrance. So I think a lot of people might be encouraged to say that this is a masculine leaning fragrance. I do think it's unisex. I think the hotter weather is really where this fragrance is going to shine, and I can see this one being worn formally as well as casually as well, but if I had to pick one, I would say casually, just because it's more within that territory. In terms of the presentation, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. I guess some might say that it looks a little bit kitschy. The first thing that I thought of was like a Bluetooth speaker, like a portable Bluetooth speaker. But I do think it's quite a different presentation and one that I haven't seen before, so I'm a fan. So my final verdict on this fragrance is, if you're sort of tired of the typical blue fragrances that have been hitting the market as of late, and you're tired of this overly saturated tonka bean thing going on with a lot of fragrances like Versace Eros and Invictus Aqua, that coumarin vibe that we seem to get ever so often from a lot of designer fragrances, definitely check this one out. There's something different going on in here. You have the lemon, the rose, the myrtle, the basil. It's a really unique note breakdown, and this is one that, all things considered, full disclosure, I am going to be wearing a lot of this spring and also well into the summertime as well, because it's a very likable, mass appealing, fresh, inviting sort of a fragrance that I think will do well in that scenario. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was my review of Opulent. I almost called it Blue Sapphire, but I know that that's a Bottega the Victorious fragrance. Opulent Sapphire by Haramain. If you own or have tried this fragrance, please let me know what you think. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Also, if you are new to this channel and you took something of value from this video, I would love it if you could support this channel and what I've been doing for the past almost 8 years now. All you need to do is click that red button in the corner, and this way, whenever I do upload future fragrance related content, it will get delivered straight to your feed. You never need to worry about missing any of my future uploads. And of course, that includes fragrance reviews just like this, top 10 videos, giveaways, unboxings, special guests, interviews, announcements, and a whole lot more. Thanks again for watching. I love you all. We'll see you soon. Bye.